My name is Bethany, and I am 33 years old. My father secretly called every commercial architecture firm in Chicago and told them I was a thief. For over a year, no one would hire me. He sneered that I would end up crawling back to serve the family. I went from being a top architecture student and lead designer to waiting tables just to survive. But last week, I finally got an interview at the most untouchable firm in the city. The chief executive walked in, studied me for a long moment, and then pulled out something that made the entire room go silent. Before I share exactly how I dismantled my family's empire, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to fight back against a toxic family who tried to destroy your future. It is a Friday evening in downtown Chicago. The steakhouse is filled with the hum of wealthy patrons and the scent of seared ribeye. I am wearing a stiff black server uniform, my feet aching after a grueling 9-hour shift. My section includes table 4 right by the windows, overlooking the city skyline. Sitting there is my father Donovan wearing a custom Italian suit that cost more than my rent for the year. Sitting next to him is my older brother Spencer. He is 35, wearing a smug expression. Across from them sit two real estate investors. My father is trying to secure their funding for his new development project. I approach the table to clear their plates, keeping my eyes down. I just want to finish my shift and go back to my tiny apartment. I have been working at this restaurant for 14 long months. 14 months of carrying heavy trays because my own father made sure I could not work in my chosen profession. I reach for my father's empty plate. He does not acknowledge me at first, too busy laughing at a joke one of the investors made. The head waiter brings the leather check folder and places it in the center of the table. The bill is over $600. My father casually pulls out his platinum credit card. Minutes later, the waiter returns with the receipt. My father signs it with an arrogant flourish. He pulls a single crumpled $5 bill from his pocket and tosses it onto the leather folder. He looks up at me, his eyes cold and calculating. He knows exactly what he is doing. The investors stand up, putting on their expensive coats and thanking my father for a wonderful evening. My father stands up as well, carefully adjusting his silk tie. He clears his throat loudly, ensuring that the wealthy patrons at all the neighboring tables are listening. "Check your wallets, gentlemen," my father announces, his voice echoing clearly through the elegant dining room. The investors freeze in their tracks, looking deeply confused. My father points a manicured finger directly at my face. "My daughter here has sticky fingers. You have to be careful around her." One of the investors chuckles nervously, clearly thinking it is a strange family joke. But my father does not crack a smile. I am completely serious. He continues, intentionally raising his voice, so the restaurant manager across the room turns his head to look at us. She could not cut it in commercial architecture. She was caught stealing from our clients. I had to fire her myself to protect the integrity of the family firm. The silence that falls over table 4 is absolutely suffocating. I stand there holding a heavy tray of dirty water glasses, my face burning with a humiliation so profound it feels like physical pain. Other diners are openly staring at me now. Whispered conversations ripple through the surrounding tables. My father is deliberately trying to break me right here in the middle of a crowded restaurant. He wants me to drop the tray, run away, and hide in shame. He wants to prove to his wealthy investors that he is a man of uncompromising integrity who would sacrifice his own blood for his business. But I do not cower. The days of me shrinking under his constant cruelty are finally over. I set the heavy serving tray down on the wooden table with a loud clatter that makes Spencer jump. I look my father directly in the eye, refusing to back down. "I was your lead architect, Dad," I say, my voice steady and clear, ringing out over the incredibly quiet dining room. "I brought in the Vanguard account. I designed the entire commercial complex that saved your firm. You fired me because I caught Spencer embezzling hundreds of thousands of dollars from it." The investors turn to look at Spencer, their eyes widening in sudden shock and suspicion. Spencer's smug expression falters before his face flushes a deep, furious red. He stands up abruptly, looming over me with an intimidating posture. He grabs his white cloth dining napkin from the table and intentionally drops it onto the floor right at my feet. "Pick it up," waitress Spencer sneers, his voice dripping with venom. "You are nothing but hired help now. Do your job." My father throws his head back and laughs loudly, a cruel, booming sound that brutally cuts through the heavy tension. "Do not listen to her, gentlemen," my father says to the alarmed investors, waving his hand, as if casually swiping away an annoying insect. "She is completely delusional. She makes up these wild, desperate stories to cover up her own terrible incompetence. That is exactly why no commercial architecture firm in this entire city has hired her for the past 14 months. He leans in closer to me, his voice dropping to a harsh, menacing whisper that only our table can hear. "I personally called every managing partner in Chicago. I made sure your name is permanently blacklisted across the state. You will never draw a blueprint again. You will wipe dirty tables until you crawl back and beg for my forgiveness." Before I can respond, the restaurant manager rushes over to our table. His face is pale and slick with nervous sweat. He recognized my father. Donovan Montgomery is a highly powerful real estate mogul who brings dozens of wealthy clients to this steakhouse every single month. The manager does not care about the truth or my side of the story. He only cares about protecting his precious bottom line. "I am so sorry, Mr. Montgomery," the manager stammers weakly, bowing his head in deference. "Is there a serious problem here tonight?" "Yes, there certainly is," my father says smoothly, straightening his jacket. "Your server is actively harassing my VIP guests and making my business partners uncomfortable." The manager turns to me immediately, his expression hardening into absolute stone. "Bethany, you are fired," he says without a single moment of hesitation or question. "Hand in your work apron right now and get out of my restaurant immediately." I look at the manager, then at my brother's triumphant, nasty smirk, and finally at my father's cold, victorious eyes. I slowly untie my black apron, fold it neatly, and place it on the table right next to the crumpled $5 bill. I walk out of the hushed dining room without shedding a single tear. I step out into the freezing Chicago rain, completely stripped of my only source of income, walking away from everything to start fighting for my life. The heavy glass doors of the restaurant swing shut behind me, sealing away the warmth, the clinking crystal, and the smug satisfaction on my father's face. I stand on the sidewalk for a moment, the freezing Chicago rain instantly soaking through my thin white uniform blouse. A busboy follows me out, stopping a few steps behind, as if he has been ordered to make sure I actually leave the property. He says nothing. His eyes dart away in discomfort, because he knows what just happened inside was not discipline. It was cruelty. But he also knows better than to cross a man like Donovan Montgomery. I turn my back on the glowing neon sign of the steakhouse and pull my thin coat tight across my chest. The walk to the subway station is a blur of biting wind and icy puddles. My non-slip work shoes offer no protection against the freezing slush that seeps through to my socks. Every step sends a dull ache shooting up my calves, a physical reminder of the 9 hours I just spent on my feet, serving people who look down on me. The platform is nearly empty when I finally arrive, the harsh fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I swipe my transit card, holding my breath, as the machine hesitates before flashing a green arrow. I know my bank account balance is hovering dangerously close to zero. Losing this job tonight means I have exactly 3 days before my landlord posts an eviction notice on my door. When the train arrives, I step into the sparsely populated car and sink into a hard plastic seat. The rhythmic clacking of the wheels against the tracks usually lulls me into a state of calm, but tonight, my heart is pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I look down at my hands. My knuckles are raw and cracked from industrial dish soap. There is a burn mark on my wrist from carrying scalding plates. 14 months ago, these hands drafted the structural framework for a 50-story commercial high-rise that won industry awards. Now they are rough and blistered, punished by a father who decided that my demand for basic ethical business practices was a betrayal of our bloodline. The train car sways as we rattle through the dark tunnels under the city. I lean my head against the cold window glass and force myself to take a slow, deep breath. I refuse to let the panic set in. Panic is what my father and Spencer are counting on. They want me desperate. They want me to call them crying, begging to be let back into the family fold on their toxic terms. I will sleep on the streets of this city before I let that happen. I pull out my phone to check the time. It is just past midnight. I open my banking app, bracing myself for the reality check. I have exactly $42.18 to my name. It is barely enough to buy groceries for the week, let alone pay the rent that is due on Monday. I close the app quickly, the bright screen making my tired eyes ache. As I swipe away my notifications, a new email pops up at the top of my screen. The sender name catches my eye immediately. Thorn Industries. My breath catches in my throat. Thorn Industries is not just an architecture firm. It is the absolute pinnacle of commercial real estate development in North America. They handle billion-dollar civic projects, design international tech campuses, and hold a portfolio that makes my father's firm look like a neighborhood landscaping business. Getting a job there is the equivalent of winning the lottery in my profession. I had sent them my portfolio over a month ago, completely bypassing human resources and directing it straight to the executive hiring committee. I never actually expected a response. My thumb hovers over the screen, suddenly terrified to open the message. It is probably a standard automated rejection. A polite email thanking me for my interest, but stating they are pursuing other candidates. I brace myself for another closed door and tap the notification. The email is not an automated rejection. It is marked as high priority, sent directly from the office of Maxwell Thorne, the famously ruthless chief executive officer. I read the first line and then I read it again, making sure my exhausted brain is not playing tricks on me. Dear Bethany Montgomery, the email begins. We have reviewed the portfolio you submitted last month. Your structural analysis and approach to urban spatial efficiency are highly unconventional, yet undeniably brilliant. We do not normally conduct interviews on weekends, but Mr. Thorne wishes to speak with you personally regarding an immediate opening for a senior design architect. Please arrive at our downtown headquarters tomorrow morning at exactly 8 o'clock. I stare at the glowing screen, reading the words a third time. An interview. An actual in-person interview with Maxwell Thorne himself, a senior design architect position. The sheer magnitude of this opportunity washes over me, completely erasing the biting cold and the exhaustion settling into my bones. If I can land this job, everything changes. It comes with a salary that would instantly solve my financial crisis, but more importantly, it comes with a level of industry prestige that my father cannot touch. Working for Thorne Industries would make me bulletproof. For the first time in 14 months, a genuine smile breaks across my face. The heavy, suffocating weight I have been carrying since my father had me escorted out of his building suddenly lifts. They have not defeated me. I still have my talent, my mind, and my vision. I just need to walk into that office tomorrow morning and prove it. I picture myself sitting across from Maxwell Thorne, showing him my blueprints, discussing load-bearing stress tests and innovative sustainable materials. I know I can secure this position. I know I am good enough. I step off the train, feeling a sudden surge of adrenaline, and practically jog the remaining 3 blocks to my apartment building. I ignore the flickering hallway lights and the smell of stale cigarette smoke in the stairwell. As I unlock the door to my cramped studio, my mind is already racing with preparations. I need to iron my only professional suit. I need to print fresh copies of my resumes. I need to review Thorne's recent public projects so I can discuss them intelligently during the interview. I toss my wet coat onto the only chair in the room and plug my phone into the wall charger. Just as the screen lights up to show the battery icon, a new text message chimes loudly in the quiet room. I glance at the screen. The sender is Spencer. My initial instinct is to ignore it. I have nothing to say to my brother after the humiliating stunt he pulled with the napkin at the restaurant. But my eyes catch the first few words of the message preview, and the spark of hope I have been nurturing for the past 30 minutes instantly turns to ice in my veins. I pick up the phone, my hands suddenly trembling again. I open the message. The words stare back at me sharp and cruel, designed to inflict maximum psychological damage. Dad just got off the phone with Maxwell Thorne, the text reads. He told him you stole the Vanguard blueprints and warned him about your mental instability. Do not bother showing up tomorrow, waitress. You will end up coming back to serve the family. The phone slips from my fingers, landing on the worn mattress with a soft thud. The silence in my apartment is absolute. My father knew. He must have a contact inside Thorne's Human Resources Department, someone who flagged my interview schedule and reported it back to him. He could not just let me be fired from a restaurant. He had to reach into the highest echelon of the architectural world and poison the well before I even had a chance to drink from it. Maxwell Thorne is known for being fiercely protective of his company's reputation. He would never hire an architect accused of intellectual property theft, especially not one whose own father claimed she was mentally unstable. The interview is dead. The opportunity is gone. My father has successfully built a wall around my career, ensuring that no matter how hard I fight or how brilliant my designs are, his voice will always reach the hiring manager first. He wants me broken. He wants me to realize that I cannot survive in this city without his money and his name. He is waiting for me to surrender. I stare at the text message, feeling panic wrap around my chest. As I read Spencer's cruel words, the fear burns away, replaced by deep anger. They want me to believe Donovan Montgomery holds the keys to the entire city, but they have underestimated me for my entire life. If my father has already poisoned my reputation with Maxwell Thorne, showing up with my standard portfolio will not be enough. I need undeniable proof of my value. I open my laptop and pull up the public records for Thorne Industries' current flagship development, the Lakeside Civic Center. I brew a pot of cheap coffee and sit down. I do not sleep. I spend the entire night dissecting every available blueprint and structural elevation, looking for blind spots that happen when large engineering teams get complacent. As the sun rises over the Chicago skyline, I find it. A fatal miscalculation hidden deep within the foundational load distribution. I print the schematics at the corner copy shop, grabbing a red pen to mark my precise corrections over Thorne's flawed designs. I slide the heavy pages into my leather portfolio. I pull my only professional suit from the closet. It is a sharp charcoal gray, a remnant of the life I lived before my father stripped it all away. I dress quickly, pulling my hair back into a tight knot. I walk the 10 blocks to the financial district. I walk through the revolving doors at exactly 7:30 in the morning, 30 minutes early. I approach the massive reception desk. The receptionist barely glances up from her glowing monitor. I state my name and explain that I am here for an 8 o'clock interview with Mr. Thorne. Her fingers tap rapidly across her keyboard. She stops, her manicured eyebrows drawing together in a tight frown. She looks up at me with condescending dismissal. Miss Montgomery, she says, your interview was officially canceled by Mr. Thorne's executive office late last night. I have strict instructions that you are not to be granted access to the upper floors. I ask that you leave the premises. I plant my feet firmly on the polished marble floor. My heart is hammering against my ribs, but my voice remains completely steady. I understand what your screen says, but there has been a significant misunderstanding. I need to speak with him directly. The receptionist gives an impatient sigh. There is no misunderstanding. You need to leave right now, or I will have security escort you out. A sleek black town car has pulled up to the curb outside the executive doors. Through the glass I see him, Maxwell Thorne. He is tall with silver hair and sharp, predatory features. He steps through the private doors, surrounded by assistants, handing him files and whispering urgent updates. He is walking purposefully toward the private executive elevator bank, completely bypassing the main security checkpoint. I do not think about the consequences. I just move. I turn away from the receptionist and power walk across the vast marble floor, ignoring her sudden demand for me to stop. 2 security guards near the velvet ropes realize what I am doing and immediately lunge forward to intercept me. Hey, you cannot go back there, one of them shouts. I duck past the velvet rope, picking up my pace to a full sprint. Maxwell Thorne has just stepped inside his private elevator. He turns around to face the lobby as the polished steel doors begin to slide shut. I am not going to lose this chance. I throw my body forward and shove my arm violently between the closing steel doors. The heavy metal bites painfully into my forearm, but the safety sensors instantly engage. The doors jerk to a halt and slide back open with a soft chime. Maxwell Thorne stands in the center of the spacious elevator. He does not flinch. He simply looks down at my arm and then slowly raises his ice-cold gaze to meet my eyes. The two security guards arrive a split second later, grabbing me roughly by the shoulders and pulling me back. I am so sorry, Mr. Thorne, the larger guard pants, tightening his grip on my jacket. We will remove her from the building immediately. Maxwell Thorne holds up a single hand. Maxwell steps forward, closing the distance between us. He studies my face with absolute disdain, his eyes devoid of any warmth. Your father called me late last night. Maxwell says, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that sends a hard shiver down my spine. He told me exactly who you are, Bethany. He said you are a massive liability. He told me you are a thief who stole confidential Vanguard blueprints from his firm. He made it very clear that you are mentally unstable and a profound disgrace to your family name. I do not tolerate corporate espionage, and I certainly do not tolerate trespassing. Give me one good reason I should not have these men drag you out by your hair and hand you directly to the local police. I forcefully wrench my shoulders free from the security guards. I do not beg for my job. I turn on my heel, march directly over to the sleek marble concierge desk situated near the elevator bank, and slam my heavy physical portfolio down onto the pristine surface. The sound cracks like a gunshot through the silent lobby. I unzip the thick leather casing and forcefully flip past my own architectural designs, bypassing my entire history. I go straight to the printed schematics of his flagship project and spin the portfolio around to face Maxwell Thorne, who has slowly stepped out of the elevator. This is the primary structural schematic for your new Lakeside Civic Center, I say, my voice ringing out with absolute authority. Your lead engineers have completely miscalculated the wind shear stress distribution. I point a steady finger at the central atrium's structural support columns covered in my stark red ink corrections. You are using standard vertical load-bearing estimates for the secondary trusses, failing to account for lateral kinetic pressure. If you construct this building using these blueprints, you will experience a catastrophic, highly publicized structural failure in the main glass atrium within 5 years. The math does not lie, Mr. Thorne. My father told you I was a liability because he is terrified of my talent. I just saved your firm from a massive public disaster. The lobby is silent. The security guards shift their weight nervously, waiting for the command to throw me out. Maxwell Thorne walks slowly over to the marble desk. He looks down at my open portfolio. He traces the line of my red ink with his eyes, following the complex structural equations that ruthlessly dismantle his own firm's design. The silence stretches for 10 agonizing seconds. Then the hostility completely vanishes from his austere face. He stares at the blueprints, and then he slowly looks up at me. A sharp, calculating gleam illuminates his cold eyes. He understands exactly what I just proved to him. Maintaining eye contact, he casually raises his hand and waves off the approaching security guards, dismissing them back to their posts. He steps away from the desk and motions his head toward the open doors of his private elevator. Your grandmother said you would have her fire, Maxwell says softly. I step into the elevator, my mind struggling to process the name that just left his lips. The polished steel doors slide shut, sealing us inside the quiet cab. The elevator begins its rapid ascent, but my stomach feels like it has dropped into the basement. I have not heard anyone speak of my grandmother in over a decade. Beatrice Montgomery passed away 16 years ago, right after my 17th birthday. My father had effectively erased her memory from our family home, refusing to discuss her. I look at Maxwell Thorne, searching his sharp profile for any sign of a joke. He remains perfectly still, watching the numbers climb. The doors open with a soft chime, revealing a penthouse office that commands a sweeping panoramic view of the Chicago skyline. The space is vast and intimidating, lined with dark mahogany bookshelves. Maxwell steps out and gestures for me to follow. I grip my portfolio tightly against my chest. He walks across the thick wool rug and firmly pushes the heavy double doors shut. The heavy click of the deadbolt locking echoes through the silent room. "Have a seat, Bethany," he says, gesturing to a sleek chair facing his massive desk. I sit down slowly, keeping my spine straight. Maxwell does not sit across from me. Instead, he walks over to a dark wood panel on the far wall. He presses his hand against a hidden seam, and the wood slides back to reveal a modern steel wall safe. He enters a sequence of numbers, turns a heavy dial, and pulls the metal door open. He reaches inside and carefully extracts a thick, weathered envelope. The heavy parchment is yellowed with age, its edges slightly frayed. But what catches my eye and makes my breath catch in my throat is the seal on the back. It is a thick stamp of deep purple wax embossed with a distinctive crest. It is the personal crest of my grandmother Beatrice. My hands begin to shake. I remember that crest from my childhood. She used it to seal the letters she sent me from her travels. She was the only person in my family who ever encouraged my obsession with structural design. While my father forced Spencer into business seminars, Beatrice would sit with me on the floor of her study, helping me build intricate bridges out of wooden blocks. When she died, a massive piece of my world died with her. Maxwell walks back to his desk and sits down, placing the heavy envelope precisely in the center of the leather blotter. He looks at me, his cold demeanor entirely replaced by a quiet, respectful gravity. "Your grandmother was a remarkable woman," Maxwell says, resting his hands on the desk. "She saw potential where others saw only risk. When I was just starting out, long before Thorne Industries became the entity it is today, the major banks refused to look at my proposals. Beatrice Montgomery was the only person in this city who believed in my vision." I stare at the purple wax seal, my mind racing. My father always told me that Beatrice was just a wealthy socialite who spent her days attending charity luncheons and spending the family fortune. He claimed her money was the only reason she had any influence. "She bankrolled my entire operation," Maxwell continues, his voice steady and low. "She provided the seed capital that allowed Thorne Industries to purchase our first major commercial developments, but she insisted on absolute anonymity. She knew your father would try to seize control of her investments if he ever found out she was operating outside of his precious family firm. She was the silent majority backer of this entire enterprise." My jaw drops. I look around the massive, luxurious office, realizing that the very foundation of this untouchable empire was built by my grandmother. She was not a frivolous socialite. She was a quiet titan. Maxwell picks up a silver letter opener and smoothly slices through the top edge of the aged envelope, breaking the purple wax seal. He reaches inside and pulls out a thick stack of legal documents. The papers are dense with legal jargon and notary stamps dated 16 years ago, mere weeks before she passed away. He slides the heavy stack across the desk toward me. I touch the dry-aged paper. The document is a deed of trust. I scan the dense paragraphs, my eyes catching on my own name highlighted in the text. I look up at Maxwell, completely bewildered. "What is this?" I ask, my voice barely a whisper. "It is your inheritance, Bethany," he replies calmly. "Before she died, Beatrice structured a highly specific, irrevocable trust. She knew your father would eventually try to crush your spirit. She saw his arrogance and his favoritism toward Spencer. She wanted to ensure that when the time came, you would have the ultimate leverage to protect yourself." Maxwell reaches across the desk and points a long finger at a specific, heavily underlined clause near the bottom of the second page. "Read that section," he instructs. I pull the document closer, squinting at the aged type. The legal language is dense, but the meaning is incredibly clear. I read the words, and then I read them again, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Upon the event of her 33rd birthday, the document reads, "Full and uncontested ownership of the Vanguard Holding Group, representing a 51% controlling stake in all associated assets, shall automatically transfer to Bethany Evelyn Montgomery." I look up, my mind struggling to process the magnitude of the words. "What is the Vanguard Holding Group?" I ask, my voice trembling. Maxwell leans back in his leather chair, steepling his fingers together. It is the shadow corporation your grandmother created to purchase strategic real estate parcels in the downtown district. He pauses, letting the weight of his words settle in the quiet room. Specifically, Vanguard Holding Group owns the 10 acres of prime commercial land situated directly in the center of the financial district. The air leaves my lungs in a sharp rush. That is the exact location of my father's defining career project, the Apex Tower. It is a $500 million mega project that my father has staked his entire reputation and the firm's financial future on. Without that specific parcel of land, the Apex Tower cannot be built. His entire empire would collapse under the weight of his unfulfilled investor obligations. "You own the land beneath his feet," Maxwell says, his voice carrying a dark, triumphant edge. "Thorn Industries is simply the management entity appointed to oversee the holding group until your 33rd birthday. I have been acting as a steward for your grandmother's estate for 16 years, waiting for you to walk through those doors. I came here begging for a job," I say, my voice breathy and shocked. "I was hoping to earn a salary just to pay rent on Monday." "You are not just hired, Bethany," he says softly, gesturing to the incredible view of the city skyline behind him. "As the majority shareholder of the entity that dictates our largest real estate maneuvers, you are my boss." I look down at the signature at the bottom of the page. Beatrice Montgomery. She did not just leave money. She left an empire. Maxwell rests his forearms on the desk. He looks at me with a sharp gleam in his eyes. "And your father's land lease expires in exactly 30 days. I stare at Maxwell, the weight of his words hanging heavy in the quiet penthouse air. 30 days. In exactly 1 month, the ground beneath my father's greatest ambition will legally vanish. I look down at the yellowed parchment tracing the edge of my grandmother's signature. A fierce, protective surge of love washes over me. Beatrice Montgomery had played the long game. She saw the corruption taking root in her own son, and she built a fortress to protect me from it. Now it is my turn to play the game just as ruthlessly as she did. I slide the deed back across the massive desk and look Maxwell directly in the eye. I outline my conditions with absolute clarity. I refuse to take a corner penthouse office or a flashy executive title. I instruct him to bury my name and my ownership behind impenetrable layers of corporate non-disclosure agreements and shell proxies. As far as Thorn Industries and the rest of the Chicago architectural world is concerned, Vanguard Holding Group must remain a faceless, silent entity. To maintain this vital illusion, I request a standard cramped cubicle on the 14th floor, surrounded by recent college graduates and junior analysts. My official title on the company directory is Entry-Level Design Associate. I spend my days reviewing basic zoning permits, organizing material samples, and fetching my own coffee. It is the perfect camouflage. No one looks twice at a junior associate quietly typing away in the middle of a crowded floor. But behind closed doors and secure, soundproof conference rooms with Maxwell, I wield my grandmother's power. My very first executive order is simple, quiet, and absolutely lethal. I instruct the legal department to immediately freeze all lease renewal negotiations regarding the downtown parcel. When my father's lawyers reach out to push the routine paperwork through Thorn Industries responds with a standard corporate delay tactic. We cite a comprehensive internal audit of all land assets. We offer no timeline for resolution. We simply stop returning their frantic phone calls. The impact is instantaneous and brutally effective. In the world of high-stakes commercial real estate, a frozen land lease is a death sentence. Without a secured location, my father cannot secure his final construction permits from the city. Without those permits, he cannot break ground. And without breaking ground, his wealthy investors begin to panic. Over the next 3 weeks, the financial bleeding at Montgomery Architecture becomes the worst-kept secret in the financial district. Rumors swirl through the industry that their primary backers are threatening to pull their funding completely. My father and Spencer are hemorrhaging cash, paying exorbitant retainer fees and interest rates, desperate to keep the Apex Tower project on life support, while they frantically try to reach the anonymous decision-makers at Vanguard Holding Group. They are drowning, and they do not even realize I am the one controlling the tide. While their world is catching fire, they somehow catch wind of my new employment. The architectural community in Chicago is small and incredibly incestuous. A former colleague from my father's firm spots me scanning my basic employee badge in the Thorn Industries lobby and immediately reports back to Spencer. The gossip travels exactly as I expect it to. The Montgomery men find out that the daughter they publicly humiliated and blacklisted has been reduced to a lowly desk worker, pushing papers in the shadow of their greatest rival. They think I am exactly where they put me, at the very bottom of the food chain, desperate and struggling to survive. It is a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week before Thanksgiving. I am sitting at my small laminate desk on the 14th floor, reviewing a genuine structural report for one of Maxwell's upcoming civic projects. The office around me hums with the mundane sounds of ringing phones and clacking keyboards. My cell phone vibrates against the desk surface. I glance at the illuminated screen. The caller ID displays my father's name. I stare at it, letting it ring 3 times. I take a slow, deep breath to steady my pulse, burying any lingering trace of the frightened girl he fired at that steakhouse. I pick up the phone. Bethany. My father says, his voice entirely devoid of the cruel, booming edge he used to destroy me in front of his investors. Instead, it is dripping with a thick, manufactured warmth that makes my skin crawl. It has been a long time. How are you holding up, sweetheart? I stare at the blank gray fabric of my cubicle wall. The casual use of a pet name, as if he did not recently try to completely dismantle my entire life and career, is breathtaking in its sheer audacity. I am doing fine, I reply, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. What do you want, Dad? He chuckles, a soft paternal sound specifically designed to disarm me. I know things got a little heated the last time we saw each other. Emotions were running high, and we both said things we deeply regret. But family is family, Bethany. Your mother is hosting our traditional Thanksgiving dinner this Thursday at the house. Spencer will be there, and we both agree that it is time to put this ugly business behind us. We want you to come home. We want to offer you forgiveness and a fresh start. Forgiveness. The word hangs in my ear heavy with toxic, manipulative implication. He is offering to forgive me for an embezzlement crime I never committed, framing himself as the benevolent patriarch opening his doors to a wayward child. He knows I am working at Thorn Industries. He knows that Thorn manages the land lease he desperately needs to save his sinking company from total bankruptcy. He thinks I am a naive junior assistant with a building keycard who can be easily manipulated into doing his dirty work. He assumes that after months of struggling, I will be so desperate for his approval and a hot meal that I will do whatever he asks. I see the trap laid out before me with crystal clarity. He does not want a daughter at his Thanksgiving table to share gratitude. He wants a corporate spy. He wants to use the desperation and trauma he intentionally inflicted upon me as leverage to save his own skin. He thinks a slice of turkey, a glass of expensive wine, and a fake apology will be enough to buy my absolute loyalty. I could hang up the phone right now. I could block his number, sit back in my chair, and simply let the 30-day deadline expire. I could watch from a comfortable distance as his massive empire turns to ash and dust. But a quiet, burning curiosity takes root inside my chest. I want to walk into that house. I want to look him directly in the eye. I want to see the nervous sweat on Spencer's brow. I want to know exactly how far they are willing to go and how low they are willing to stoop to use the daughter they threw away. I will be there, I say, letting just enough hesitation and vulnerability slip into my voice to make him believe his emotional trap has worked flawlessly. What time should I arrive? My father exhales a loud, theatrical breath of profound relief. 4 o'clock, he says smoothly, satisfaction radiating through the phone. We will be so glad to have you back where you belong, Bethany. I lower the phone to my desk, staring at the dark screen as a cold smile pulls at the corners of my mouth. He actually believes he has me exactly where he wants me. The sheer arrogance of Donovan Montgomery is a breathtaking thing to witness, but it is also his greatest vulnerability. He cannot fathom a world where he is not the one holding all the cards. I spend the rest of the week continuing my quiet routine at Thorn Industries, filing paperwork, and blending into the background, all while counting down the hours until Thursday. When Thanksgiving Day arrives, I drive my beat-up sedan through the wrought iron gates of the Montgomery estate in the affluent northern suburbs. The sprawling stone mansion is lit up like a fortress against the crisp autumn evening. Expensive luxury cars line the sweeping circular driveway, showcasing the wealth my family loves to flaunt. I park near the edge of the manicured lawn, step out into the freezing air, and pull my simple wool coat tight across my shoulders. I walk up the wide brick steps and press the brass doorbell. The heavy oak door swings open, revealing the grand foyer bathed in the warm glow of a massive crystal chandelier. My mother, Barbara, stands in the entryway. She is wearing a tailored cashmere dress, her hair perfectly styled, dripping in diamonds my father bought to silence her occasional complaints. Her eyes sweep over my modest attire, her expression instantly tightening with familiar disappointment. She does not offer a hug or a word of welcome. Instead, she turns sharply and walks toward the formal dining room, expecting me to follow like an obedient shadow. I step inside, pulling the heavy door shut behind me. The house smells of roasted turkey, expensive sage stuffing, and the cloying scent of my mother's heavy floral perfume. I follow her into the dining room, where the long mahogany table is already set with fine china and polished silver. Without looking at me, my mother picks up a stack of dirty appetizer plates left over from whatever cocktail hour I was intentionally not invited to. She shoves the heavy ceramic stack directly into my hands. Take these to the kitchen and scrape them before the caterers get upset. She orders, her tone flat and dismissive. It is good you are back to work, Bethany. Spencer just bought a new yacht and we need to celebrate real achievements tonight, not dwell on your past mistakes. Make yourself useful and bring out the water pitchers. I stand there, the heavy plates pressing into my palms. I look at my mother, absorbing the casual cruelty of her words. She is treating me like the hired help, completely erasing my entire history as an award-winning architect. I do not argue. I do not defend myself. I simply take the plates and walk into the kitchen. I scrape the remnants of expensive caviar into the garbage bin, feeling a profound sense of peace. Their insults no longer have the power to break me because I know the absolute truth. I set the plates by the sink, grab the crystal water pitchers, and carry them back into the dining room, just as my father and brother take their seats. Spencer is wearing a tailored navy suit, looking remarkably smug as he swirls a glass of expensive bourbon. He refuses to make eye contact with me, acting as though my presence is an unpleasant odor he is forced to tolerate. My father sits at the head of the table, projecting the image of a benevolent patriarch. He offers a hollow prayer of gratitude, thanking the universe for the family's continued prosperity and unyielding success, completely ignoring the fact that his firm is currently bleeding cash and teetering on the edge of total ruin. The dinner proceeds with agonizing slowness. I sit near the foot of the table, quietly eating my food while Spencer dominates the conversation. He boasts loudly about his upcoming vacation to the Mediterranean on his new yacht, bragging about the wealthy investors he plans to entertain. My mother hangs on his every word, praising his business acumen and his brilliant future. The entire performance is a desperate facade. Behind their confident smiles and boasting, I can see the tight strain around my father's eyes. I can see the way Spencer's hand shakes slightly when he reaches for his glass. They are terrified. They are putting on a theatrical display of immense wealth to convince themselves that they are not actually drowning. As the caterers clear the main course and begin serving thick slices of pecan pie, the artificial warmth in the room abruptly vanishes. The casual family chatter dies away, replaced by a heavy, suffocating tension. My mother delicately wipes her mouth with a linen napkin and excuses herself, retreating to the living room. Spencer leans back in his chair, crossing his arms over his chest. My father rests his elbows on the polished mahogany table and leans forward, dropping the supportive, forgiving act entirely. His eyes lock onto mine, cold and entirely transactional. "We know you are working at Thorn Industries," my father says, his voice dropping to a low, commanding register. We know you are fetching coffee and filing permits on the 14th floor. It is a humiliating position for a Montgomery, but it happens to put you in a uniquely useful location. I set my fork down, keeping my expression perfectly blank. Is that why you invited me here, I ask? Do not play stupid, Bethany Spencer snaps, leaning forward. We know Thorne is managing the land lease for the Apex Tower. They are stonewalling us. They claim they cannot reach the anonymous owner of the Vanguard Holding Group. It is a stalling tactic to bleed us dry, and we are not going to let Maxwell Thorne play games with our flagship project. My father raises a hand, silencing Spencer, before turning his sharp gaze back to me. You have an employee keycard, Bethany. That piece of plastic grants you access to the internal network after hours. You are going to go into the office this weekend. You are going to log into the main server, access the secure executive files, and find the true identity of the Vanguard Holding Group owner. I need their name, their direct contact information, and their specific lease requirements. I stare at him, letting the sheer magnitude of his demand hang in the quiet air. You want me to commit corporate espionage, I say softly. You want me to hack into my employer's secure servers and steal highly confidential client data. I want you to finally prove your loyalty to this family. My father counters, his tone turning vicious. This is your only chance to make up for the shame you brought the family. If you get me that name and secure this information, I will allow you to attend future holidays. I will let you back into the fold. I place my napkin on the table with icy calm. I do not need your permission to succeed, Dad, and I am not a thief, no matter what you told the industry. I walk toward the door. Spencer sneers. Enjoy fetching coffee. We have a meeting with the anonymous landowner's representative on Monday. Once we secure that lease, we are buying out Thorne, and I will fire you myself. I smile over my shoulder. I will see you on Monday, Spencer. The weekend passes in a blur of quiet anticipation. Monday morning arrives with a crisp chill in the Chicago air, but inside the 52nd floor boardroom at Thorne Industries, the atmosphere is strictly controlled. The long, polished oak table gleams under modern recessed lighting, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a commanding view of the financial district. At exactly 9 o'clock, the heavy glass doors swing open. Donovan Montgomery strides into the room, projecting the supreme, untouchable confidence he has spent decades perfecting. Spencer follows closely on his heels, carrying a thick leather briefcase tucked under his arm. They are not alone. Two older men walk in beside them, their expressions tight with thinly veiled anxiety. These are Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn, the primary financial backers for the Apex Tower. I know their faces from the desperate emails my father had forwarded to his executive team months ago. They are the men whose money is currently bleeding out into a frozen development site. Donovan immediately moves to the center of the table, pulling out a chair for Arthur and clapping him on the shoulder with practiced ease. There is no need to worry, Arthur, my father says, his booming voice echoing off the glass walls. This is merely a bureaucratic formality. Thorne Industries loves to drag their feet on these lease renewals to justify their exorbitant management fees. We will have the signatures today, and our crews will break ground by the end of the week. Spencer opens his briefcase and pulls out a stack of pristine legal documents. He slides the pre-drafted lease renewal agreement onto the center of the oak table, smoothing the cover page with his palm. He taps his expensive watch, looking around the empty room with an exaggerated sigh of annoyance. They are deliberately wasting our time to establish dominance, Spencer mutters to Marcus. It is a pathetic negotiation tactic. When the landowner representative finally decides to show up, we will make it very clear that Montgomery architecture dictates the timeline, not some faceless holding company. The four men settle into their high-backed leather chairs, adjusting their silk ties and pouring glasses of iced water from the crystal pitcher on the table. Donovan leans back, resting his ankle on his knee, painting a picture of a man who owns the entire building. He begins regaling Arthur with a story about his latest golf trip, deliberately speaking loudly to fill the quiet room. He wants to project absolute control to assure his nervous investors that the Montgomery empire is rock solid. But his foot taps rhythmically against the carpet, betraying the sheer panic clawing at his chest. If he does not walk out of this room with a signed lease, Arthur and Marcus will pull their funding by noon. The Apex Tower will die on paper, and the family firm will default on millions in outstanding loans. The heavy double doors at the end of the boardroom suddenly click open. The low hum of conversation at the oak table instantly ceases. Donovan drops his foot to the floor, straightening his suit jacket as he prepares to unleash his practiced intimidation tactics on whoever walks through that door. I step into the room. I am not wearing the cheap, ill-fitting slacks and worn blouses I wore while working double shifts at the restaurant. I am wearing a sharp, custom-tailored suit in deep midnight navy. The cut is flawless, designed to project absolute authority and unwavering power. My posture is perfectly straight, my shoulders pulled back, and my expression is a mask of cool, impenetrable calm. I do not look like a junior analyst fetching coffee, and I certainly do not look like the broken, desperate daughter they threw out onto the street. I look like the architect of their destruction. I walk past the row of empty chairs, feeling the heavy, stunned silence wash over the room. I do not stop at the side of the table. I walk directly to the head of the boardroom, pulling out the massive leather chair reserved for the highest-ranking executive. I sit down slowly, resting my hands on the polished oak surface. Maxwell Thorne steps into the room a second later. He is wearing his signature charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly styled. He does not take a seat at the table. Instead, the famously ruthless chief executive officer of Thorne Industries walks directly to my side and stands dutifully behind my right shoulder, holding a stack of dark gray files. He places the files gently on the table right in front of me, stepping back to wait for my instruction. Donovan stares at me, his eyes wide, his jaw slightly slack. He looks from me to Maxwell, his brain visibly struggling to comprehend the visual information in front of him. For a moment, he is entirely speechless. Spencer is the first to react, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "What the hell is this?" Spencer demands, his voice cracking slightly. "Bethany, what are you doing in here? Get out of that chair." I do not answer him. I simply look at the pre-drafted lease agreement sitting in the middle of the table. I reach out, pull the stack of papers toward me, and flip open the cover page with deliberate slowness. Donovan slams his heavy fist down on the oak table. The crystal water glasses rattle violently against the wood. The manufactured warmth he projected just moments ago completely vanishes, replaced by a surge of pure, unfiltered rage. He points a trembling finger directly at my face. "This is not a game, Bethany!" he shouts, his voice vibrating with fury. "I told you to get me the information on the holding company, not pull some pathetic stunt to humiliate me in front of my investors." Arthur Vance shifts uncomfortably in his seat, looking at my father with deep confusion. "Donovan? Who is this woman?" the investor asks. "She is a nobody," Donovan barks, not taking his furious eyes off me. "She is a disgraced former employee who is currently working as a coffee girl on the lower floors of this building." He turns his aggressive glare toward Maxwell Thorne. "Maxwell, I do not know what kind of twisted corporate joke you are trying to pull by letting your junior assistant sit in on a multi-million-dollar negotiation, but I am not laughing. Get the coffee girl out of this room right now before the adults handle business. If she is not out of my sight in 10 seconds, I am walking out that door and taking my project to another management firm." Maxwell Thorne does not flinch at my father's booming demands. He simply stands at my side, his expression carved from stone. "You are not in a position to make demands," Donovan Maxwell says, his voice a smooth, deadly rumble that echoes through the quiet space. "And you certainly cannot afford to walk away." He gestures respectfully toward my chair. "Allow me to introduce you to the owner of the Vanguard Holding Group," he announces very clearly. "Bethany Montgomery is the anonymous majority shareholder who completely controls the commercial land sitting directly beneath your proposed project. She is the person who holds your entire lease. The silence that follows his formal declaration is absolute." The color violently drains from Donovan and Spencer's arrogant faces as the two wealthy investors stare at me in total disbelieving shock. The silence stretches until it becomes a physical weight pressing down on the room. Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn look back and forth between Mr. Maxwell Thorne and me, clearly waiting for the punchline to a very bad joke. But Maxwell remains perfectly still, a silent sentinel, enforcing the absolute truth of his statement. Donovan's mouth opens and closes as he tries to process the reality that the lowly coffee girl, the daughter he fired and publicly humiliated, holds the absolute power to crush his empire. Spencer looks physically ill, his eyes darting frantically around the boardroom as if searching for an escape route. I do not give them the luxury of recovering their composure. I reach out and place my fingertips on the thick stack of premium paper containing the lease renewal. Spencer watches my hands, his breathing shallow and rapid. I slide the documents into the exact center of the table, aligning the edges perfectly. Then, with a slow, highly deliberate movement, I firmly grasp the thick stack and smoothly rip the entire paper agreement in half. The sound of tearing paper is shockingly loud in the quiet room. I let the torn halves flutter onto the polished oak surface. Donovan violently grips the arms of his chair, his knuckles turning stark white. Before he can launch into another tirade, I reach into the pocket of my suit jacket, retrieve a small silver flash drive, and slide it across the table to Maxwell. He takes it without a word, plugs it into the boardroom console, and dims the overhead lights. A massive screen descends from the ceiling behind me. It flickers to life, illuminating the dark room with the incredibly detailed architectural blueprints for the Apex Tower. Spencer gasps a sharp, choked sound. I turn my attention directly to Arthur and Marcus. Gentlemen, you are currently investing $250 million into this development, I say, keeping my voice calm and professional. You were told that the Apex Tower would be a crown jewel of the Chicago skyline. You were told that Montgomery Architecture possesses the vision and technical expertise to execute a project of this scale. You were lied to. I point to the glowing screen behind me, directing their attention to the grid of structural supports framing the lower levels. I spent the last 3 weeks conducting a comprehensive internal audit of these designs, utilizing my full access to the project files submitted for our review. What I found was not just standard corner cutting, it is a masterclass in profound, dangerous incompetence. Spencer shifts violently in his seat, sweat forming on his forehead. He demands that I turn the projector off. His voice shrill, but Maxwell steps forward, silencing my brother with a single warning look. I tap a button on the table console, zooming in on the load-bearing foundation plans. The architectural integrity of any skyscraper begins here, I explain, addressing the investors. My brother designed this foundation using a standard concrete mixture and minimal steel reinforcement, calculating the wind shear and weight distribution based on outdated municipal models. He failed to account for the unique soil composition of this specific parcel, which sits over an old, unstable landfill system. If you build this tower using Spencer's current specifications, the structural settling will exceed safety margins within the first 5 years. The building will literally begin to lean. I switch to the next slide, revealing the complex plumbing schematics. But the foundation is only the beginning of the catastrophe. I continue, my voice steady and relentless. Look closely at the routing for the primary water lines through the upper residential floors. Spencer routed them directly over the main electrical chases to save space and reduce immediate material costs. It is a blatant violation of basic commercial building codes. One minor leak on the 50th floor would trigger a cascading electrical failure throughout the entire upper half of the tower. This is not a luxury development. It is a catastrophic liability waiting to happen, and you two are the exact ones left holding the massive financial bag. Arthur Vance leans forward, his face turning an angry purple. He squints at the glowing screen, his eyes tracing the red lines, highlighting the fatal flaws. He turns his furious gaze toward my father. Donovan swallows hard, trying to summon his commanding presence, but the absolute panic in his eyes betrays him completely. Arthur slams his hand flat on the table, the smack echoing loudly in the room. He demands to know if what I am saying is true. He demands to know if Donovan actually allowed his son to submit a dangerously flawed design to secure their funding. My father stammers as he attempts to formulate a defense. He claims that these are preliminary drawings, that the engineering team would catch these discrepancies during the final review. But Marcus Lynn shakes his head, his expression hardening. Marcus points out that they signed off on these exact blueprints just last week under Donovan's explicit assurance that they were ready for immediate city approval. The room erupts into chaos. Arthur pushes his heavy leather chair back so violently it nearly tips entirely over. He shouts that he is withdrawing his firm's backing immediately. Marcus joins him, stating that they will be launching a full forensic audit of every dollar Montgomery Architecture has currently spent. The investors gather their briefcases, their voices blending into a chorus of threats regarding lawsuits and financial ruin. Spencer sits frozen in his chair, his mouth hanging slightly open as he watches his entire career evaporate in real time. The investors storm out of the boardroom, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind them, sealing the fate of the Apex Tower. The silence that returns to the room is thick and suffocating. I sit at the head of the table watching the devastation settle over my father. He is completely, utterly ruined. The investors are gone, the lease is destroyed, and the industry will know about Spencer's incompetence by nightfall. The Montgomery Empire is officially dead. I quietly wait for Donovan to physically collapse to finally admit defeat and walk away. Instead, a low, menacing chuckle escapes his throat. He slowly rises from his chair, ignoring his panicked son. The frantic desperation vanishes from his face, replaced by a cold, calculating malice that makes the hairs on my neck stand up. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a thick, sealed legal folder, and walks toward my end of the table. He stops directly in front of me, staring down with eyes that hold absolutely no paternal warmth, only the ruthless instinct of a predator. He slams the heavy legal folder onto the desk over the torn pieces of the lease agreement. He leans over the table, bringing his face dangerously close to mine. My mother, Beatrice, was diagnosed with severe dementia a month before she died, he says, his voice a quiet, lethal hiss. I have a court order right here challenging the validity of her trust. We have medical records, sworn statements from her nurses and top-tier attorneys ready to prove she was not of sound mind when she transferred Vanguard to you. He taps the folder with one thick finger, a triumphant, wicked smile stretching across his face. If you do not sign this pristine land over to me right now, Bethany, I will tie your assets up in litigation for 2 decades and you will die penniless. He does not wait for my response. Donovan turns on his heel and marches out of the boardroom, his heavy footsteps echoing like hammer strikes against the thick glass walls. Spencer scrambles to gather his ruined blueprints from the table, his face pale and slick with nervous sweat. He hurries after our father, shooting me one last venomous glare before the heavy double doors swing shut behind them. The quiet returns to the 52nd floor, but the air in the room feels entirely different. It is heavy with the immediate crushing reality of my father's threat. I look down at the legal folder he left resting on the polished oak surface. Maxwell steps forward and opens it, his sharp eyes scanning the dense, aggressive legal jargon. After a long moment, he looks up and confirms what I already suspect. Donovan has successfully filed an emergency injunction. A judge with deep, lucrative ties to the Montgomery family has signed the order, effectively freezing every single asset tied to the Vanguard Holding Group. The downtown land lease, the corporate bank accounts, the proxy shares, all of it is now temporarily locked in a sprawling legal purgatory. I sink back into the leather executive chair, feeling a cold, heavy weight settle deep in my chest. My father is perfectly willing to drag his own mother's name through the mud, publicly declaring her mentally unfit just to steal the one piece of leverage I have over him. He possesses a massive army of ruthless corporate lawyers and an endless war chest built on decades of cutthroat business deals. The sheer scale of his legal resources threatens to completely suffocate me right here in this quiet room. The rest of the week is a brutal masterclass in psychological warfare. Donovan's legal team immediately goes on the offensive. They bury Thorne Industries in a mountain of discovery requests, preliminary motions, and aggressive subpoenas. They want to drain me financially and emotionally before we ever see the inside of a courtroom. I spend my days huddled in a secure windowless conference room with Maxwell and his senior internal counsel, reviewing our limited and rapidly shrinking options. By Friday evening, I am completely exhausted. I sit alone in my small, dimly lit apartment, staring out at the freezing rain lashing against the window pane. My cell phone vibrates loudly against the kitchen counter. The caller ID displays my mother's private number. I know I should let it go to voicemail, but a lingering, foolish sliver of hope compels me to answer. I pick up the phone, bracing myself for the conversation. Barbara does not ask how I am doing. She does not ask if I am all right. Her voice cuts through the line sharp and laced with a manufactured theatrical agony. "Why must you ruin your brother's future?" she demands, wielding guilt like a finely honed weapon. "Just sign the papers, Bethany. You are destroying this family out of petty jealousy." I grip the edge of the granite counter, my knuckles turning stark white. She sounds exactly like she did when I was a vulnerable child, constantly demanding that I shrink my own ambitions down, so Spencer could comfortably shine. She knows my father is lying about my grandmother. She knows Beatrice was perfectly lucid and brilliant until the day her heart simply stopped beating. Yet my mother is perfectly willing to participate in this monstrous, insulting lie just to protect her own comfortable life and my brother's fragile ego. I take a slow, steadying breath. "I am not destroying anything, Mom," I say, my voice perfectly calm. "Dad built a fragile house of cards, and Spencer just lit the match. I am simply refusing to burn with them." I pull the phone away from my ear and press the end button, cutting off her frantic, angry protests. I immediately block her number, dropping the device onto the counter. I utterly refuse to surrender to their toxic manipulation. A sudden, sharp realization cuts through my deep exhaustion. I walk into my living room and sit on the edge of the sofa, letting my mind race back to the quiet days I spent with my grandmother before she passed away. Beatrice Montgomery was a brilliant, incredibly meticulous woman. She built the financial foundation of our family wealth with her own two hands and a razor-sharp intellect. She knew exactly who her son was. She knew Donovan was ruthless, greedy, and completely devoid of a moral compass. She fully anticipated that he would eventually try to take the downtown parcel for himself by any means necessary. She would never have left a legal loophole as massive as a fake dementia diagnosis completely unprotected. She would have built a silent fail-safe, a bulletproof insurance policy hidden entirely out of his expansive reach. I grab my wool coat and my car keys, rushing out the door and driving straight back through the rain to the Thorne Industries building. The massive skyscraper is mostly dark, the grand marble lobby deserted except for the overnight security guards standing by the turnstiles. I swipe my executive badge and take the private elevator all the way up to the top floor. Maxwell is still sitting in his corner office, his massive desk completely covered in thick legal briefs and property maps. I tell him my theory. I tell him that Beatrice must have left something highly specific behind to prove her total competency, something Donovan could never touch or corrupt. Maxwell listens intently, nodding his head in agreement. We take the heavy service elevator all the way down to the sub-basement, entering the highly secure climate-controlled archives where Thorne Industries stores its oldest physical records. The room is vast and echoing, filled with endless rows of gray metal filing cabinets and heavy fireproof storage boxes. Maxwell leads me to the restricted section specifically designated for the Vanguard Holding Group. We unlock the steel grates and begin the grueling process of tearing through 16-year-old financial logs and corporate documents. The hours slowly bleed into one another. The air in the archives is dry and smells of old paper and cleaning supplies. We comb through endless stacks of original property deeds, massive tax returns, and handwritten board meeting minutes from the early 2000s. We are looking for anything slightly out of the ordinary, a tiny irregularity in the filing system, a missing sequence of numbers, or a personal note tucked between official ledgers. My eyes burn fiercely from staring at the faded ink, and my fingers are stained gray from handling the old fragile files. The deep silence of the underground vault is broken only by the sound of rustling paper. I am working my way through a reinforced metal drawer that Maxwell brought over from the main bank vault earlier in the week. I reach the bottom of the long drawer and my fingertips brush the back panel. The cold, smooth steel feels slightly uneven beneath my touch, completely out of place. I press my thumb against the small, imperceptible ridge and push downward. It finally yields with a quiet click. At 3 o'clock in the morning, hidden behind a false panel in a safety deposit box drawer, I find a collection of audio cassettes and a set of handwritten ledgers. I carefully lift the stack of bound leather notebooks and the small plastic cases out of the hidden compartment. The heavy ledgers are yellowed with age, filled with my grandmother's precise, elegant handwriting. Maxwell clears a space on his massive desk, bringing over a brass reading lamp. I open the first ledger, my eyes scanning the columns of numbers and dates. Beside the financial logs, my grandmother had meticulously taped bank transfer receipts and copies of canceled checks. I look closer at massive withdrawals dated nearly 3 decades ago, right around the time my father founded Montgomery Architecture. The signatures on the withdrawal slips catch my immediate attention. They are supposed to belong to Beatrice, but the sweeping loops and sharp angles are a clumsy imitation. My breath catches in my throat as I realize I'm looking at undeniable proof of forgery. Maxwell returns from a storage closet down the hall with an old, bulky cassette player. He plugs it into the wall, takes the first tape from the plastic case, and presses play. A hiss of static fills the quiet office, followed by the clear voice of Beatrice Montgomery. Hearing her speak after all these years sends a sharp ache straight to my heart. Her tone is not warm or grandmotherly. It is the voice of a woman backed into a corner, recording her truth for a future she knew would eventually come. She details how Donovan did not build the family firm from scratch with his brilliant business acumen. He stole the initial seed money directly from her private accounts. When she discovered the theft and confronted him, Donovan did not apologize or ask for forgiveness. Instead, he manufactured a vile scandal involving my late grandfather and threatened to expose it to the press, blackmailing his mother into agonizing silence to protect the family name. He held that threat over her head for decades, using her wealth to build his empire. I hit the stop button, the loud click echoing in the heavy silence of the office. The sheer depth of my father's depravity is staggering. He is not just an arrogant narcissist. He is a calculated thief who built his entire life on his mother's forced silence. He had the audacity to stand in the boardroom and accuse her of severe dementia, using the exact same playbook to try and steal from me. Maxwell does not say a word. He picks up the phone on his desk and makes a brief, urgent call. Within the hour, a skilled team of Thorne Industries forensic accountants arrives in the boardroom. They are quiet, focused professionals who immediately go to work analyzing the decades-old ledgers. I provide them with the current financial data from the Apex Tower project, the files Spencer and Donovan arrogantly assumed were safe. The accountants work through the morning, their fingers flying across laptop keyboards, as they cross-reference Beatrice's old financial pathways with the modern data hacked from the Montgomery servers. By early afternoon, the lead accountant approaches Maxwell and me with a grim, tight-lipped expression. He projects a series of financial routing maps onto the screen. The pattern of theft is entirely generational. Spencer is not just an incompetent architect designing structurally flawed buildings. He is actively bleeding the Apex Tower dry. The accountants trace a complex web of wire transfers, showing that Spencer has been systematically funneling millions of dollars from Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn directly into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. But the money does not stop there. It is quickly moved into a series of shell companies controlled by a notorious syndicate operating underground casinos across the Midwest. Spencer has accumulated massive, insurmountable gambling debts, and he is using the investors' initial capital to keep violent creditors away from his front door. I stare at the glowing red numbers on the screen, a cold realization settling over me. Spencer and Donovan are exactly the same. They are desperate, hollow men who will eagerly destroy anyone around them to maintain the illusion of success. My father stole from his mother to build his firm, And now his golden child is stealing from investors to save his own skin. They are entirely morally bankrupt, and they are about to drag half the financial district down with them if they are not stopped. Maxwell's private cell phone chimes loudly, breaking the heavy silence in the boardroom. He answers, listens for a few moments, and ends the call with a dark chuckle. He turns to me, shaking his head in absolute disbelief. Donovan is completely unaware of what we have just uncovered, Maxwell says, pulling up a digital press release on his tablet and sliding it across the table toward me. In fact, he is doubling down on his own delusions. He just sent out a massive high-profile media alert to every major architectural and financial publication in Chicago. I look down at the screen. The press release announces a lavish exclusive gala at the Drake Hotel for this coming Saturday night. The invitation boasts that the event will celebrate the imminent groundbreaking of the Apex Tower. Furthermore, Donovan is using the extravagant party to formally announce Spencer's promotion to Chief Executive Officer of Montgomery Architecture. It is a brilliant, viciously manipulative public relations maneuver. Donovan knows Arthur and Marcus are terrified and ready to pull their funding. By throwing a massive public celebration and inviting the city's most elite socialites, politicians, and industry leaders, he is attempting to trap the investors. If Arthur and Marcus back out now, they will look weak and foolish in front of their wealthy peers. Donovan is gambling everything on the sheer weight of social pressure, betting that the investors will simply fall in line rather than cause a public scene at the gala. He thinks he can smile and pour expensive champagne and pretend the ground beneath his feet is not actively collapsing. He believes his emergency injunction freezing my assets gives him the upper hand, buying him exactly enough time to force the lease renewal through sheer intimidation. He assumes I am sitting in my apartment crying over his vicious legal threats and mourning the temporary loss of the Vanguard land. He has absolutely no idea that I'm currently holding the weapon that will destroy him. I look at the original leather ledgers sitting on the boardroom table. I look at the small plastic audio cassettes containing my grandmother's voice, the voice he tried so desperately to erase. The fear and exhaustion that have plagued me for months completely vanish, replaced by a cold, sharp, and absolute clarity. I am no longer the frightened girl crying in a steakhouse, desperate for a father's love that never actually existed. I am the executor of Beatrice Montgomery's final will, and I am going to finish the job she started. I reach out and gather the fragile ledgers, stacking them neatly. I pick up the audio cassettes and place them securely inside my leather briefcase. I carefully slide the forensic accounting reports detailing Spencer's offshore gambling transfers into a thick manila folder, slipping that in right beside my grandmother's legacy. I snap the brass clasps of the briefcase shut, the sound echoing sharply in the quiet boardroom. I pick up the briefcase by the handle and look directly at Maxwell. His expression is perfectly neutral, but there is a distinct gleam of anticipation in his eyes. We are crashing a party, I say. The heavy brass doors of the grand ballroom at the Drake Hotel are pulled open by two white-gloved attendants, and the volume of the Montgomery Gala washes over us. The room is a sprawling sea of tailored tuxedos and shimmering floor-length gowns. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm golden glow over the absolute elite of Chicago. Politicians mingle with media moguls, and wealthy developers clink champagne flutes with city planners. It is exactly the kind of opulent, high-profile spectacle Donovan designed to trap his investors through sheer social pressure. Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn are likely somewhere in this crowd, being aggressively charmed by Spencer. But the carefully curated atmosphere shifts the moment I cross the threshold. I do not look like the disgraced daughter who was publicly fired and stripped of her family name. I arrive looking like an absolute powerhouse. I am wearing a sharply tailored deep emerald suit that fits like modern armor, my posture straight and my chin held high. Maxwell walks perfectly in step at my right side, his presence alone radiating an intimidating corporate authority that commands immediate respect. Trailing just behind us is a formidable phalanx of top-tier corporate litigators from Thorne Industries, 5 men and women carrying sleek leather briefcases and expressions of absolute chilling neutrality. We do not blend in with the celebratory crowd. We slice straight through it. Conversations falter and die out as we pass. Heads turn and whispers ripple through the elegant room like a sudden drop in barometric pressure. I keep my gaze fixed dead ahead, refusing to acknowledge the stares of people who actively ignored me for years when I was just Spencer's lowly assistant. It does not take long for Donovan to spot the disturbance. He is standing near a massive illuminated ice sculpture carved in the shape of the apex tower holding court with a circle of local aldermen. The smile vanishes the second his eyes lock onto mine. I can see the instantaneous flash of shock register on his features, followed immediately by a dark, surging fury. He clearly believed his emergency injunction had paralyzed me, leaving me weeping in my apartment, while he celebrated his stolen victory. Seeing me here flanked by an army of legal muscle shatters his illusion of complete control. He excuses himself from the politicians with a tight, forced nod and immediately signals to the head of his private security detail. Within seconds, Donovan is marching aggressively across the polished ballroom floor, intercepting us near the center of the room. Two large men in dark suits flank him, along with the hotel's own head of security, a stern-looking man wearing a radio earpiece. Donovan stops directly in my path, physically blocking my progression toward the main stage, where Spencer is currently glad-handing a group of reporters. My father does not bother lowering his voice. In fact, he purposefully projects it, utilizing his booming, authoritative tone to ensure the surrounding guests hear every single word. He wants to publicly humiliate me, utilizing the exact same psychological tactics he has weaponized my entire life. He looks at the hotel security chief and points a thick finger directly at my chest. I want this woman physically removed from the premises immediately. Donovan demands, his voice echoing over the quiet string quartet playing in the corner. She was not invited to this private event. He turns his head slightly, addressing the staring crowd with a look of manufactured paternal sorrow. I apologize for this disturbance, everyone. My daughter is unfortunately mentally unstable. She has been struggling with severe delusions, and she is currently trespassing. Please escort her out before she hurts herself or causes any more of a scene. The sheer cruelty of his words hangs heavily in the air. A few guests murmur in shocked sympathy, casting pitying glances in my direction. Donovan expects me to shrink back, to flush with deep embarrassment, or to lose my temper and scream, thereby proving his vile accusation of mental instability. I do not give him a single ounce of the reaction he so desperately craves. I stand perfectly still, my expression an impenetrable mask of ice. I do not raise my voice and I do not back away. The hotel security chief steps forward, looking uncomfortable, but bound by his duty to the man who rented the ballroom. He holds up a placating hand and asks me to step toward the exit quietly. He tells me he does not want to use force, but this is a private, ticketed corporate event, and I am disrupting the host. I give Maxwell a simple, silent nod. He gestures to the lead litigator standing behind me. The attorney, an imposing woman with silver hair, steps smoothly between me and the security chief. She opens her slim leather portfolio, retrieves a single legal document, and holds it out. Her tone cuts through the tension. "You will not be removing anyone from this building tonight," she states calmly. The security chief frowns, hesitating before taking the heavy parchment. His eyes rapidly scan the dense legal text, moving down to the embossed corporate seals at the bottom of the page. I watch the man's posture completely change in real time. The rigid, authoritative stance drains out of him, replaced by a sudden, profound realization. The document is the finalized acquisition record from earlier this afternoon. Vanguard Holding Group. My holding company quietly finalized the purchase of the broader hospitality conglomerate that owns this exact hotel property. I am not a trespasser crashing a private party. I am the absolute, unquestioned owner of the very ground Donovan is currently standing on. The security chief swallows hard, his face flushing a deep shade of crimson. He carefully hands the document back to my lead attorney, takes two large, deliberate steps backward, and lowers his head respectfully in my direction. I apologize for the profound misunderstanding, ma'am, the chief says, his voice carrying clearly to Donovan. Please let me know if you or your guests require absolutely anything during your stay at your property tonight. Donovan stares at the security chief, completely bewildered. He demands to know what is going on, his voice cracking with a sharp panic. He orders the man to do his job and throw me out onto the street. But the security chief shakes his head, steps entirely away from my father, and signals his men to stand down. The protective wall Donovan thought he had bought and paid for completely evaporates. He is left standing alone in the center of the ballroom, entirely exposed. The surrounding guests are now whispering furiously, the narrative of the crazy, disgraced daughter instantly shattering. Donovan looks back at me, his chest heaving under his expensive tuxedo jacket. The smug, arrogant certainty that defined his entire existence is rapidly slipping through his fingers, and he can feel it. He takes a step closer, abandoning his public performance entirely. The mask drops, revealing the desperate, cornered predator underneath. His eyes are dark and full of pure, unadulterated venom. You think a clever little real estate trick changes anything? He hisses, his voice a low, gravelly, menacing threat meant only for my ears. I froze your main corporate accounts. I destroyed your late mother's trust. You have absolutely nothing left. I look up at him, allowing a slow, cold, victorious smile to finally spread across my face. I do not have nothing at all, Donovan. I have Grandma's tapes. Donovan's face loses its color. The arrogant sneer melts away. He takes a staggering step backward, his mouth opening to speak, but no words come out. I do not wait for him to recover his shattered senses. I immediately turn away, my heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor, and walk directly toward the massive stage at the far end of the vast ballroom. Maxwell and my entire legal team fall into perfect step behind me, creating an impenetrable wall. We seamlessly merge into the crowd of guests, taking up a position near the front, right beside the reserved tables, where Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn are seated. The timing is flawless. The string quartet abruptly stops playing, the house lights dim, and a spotlight hits the stage. Spencer strides out, soaking in the thunderous applause of Chicago's elite. He is wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo, his hair perfectly coiffed, his smile blindingly bright. Gripping the edges of the mahogany podium, he looks out over the sea of wealthy investors, politicians, and flashing media cameras. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Spencer begins, his voice booming over the sound system. Tonight is a celebration of vision, of pushing the boundaries of what is physically possible in this great city. The Apex Tower will not just pierce the skyline, it will redefine it entirely. He pauses, locking eyes with Arthur and Marcus. With the unwavering support of our visionary financial partners, we are breaking ground on a legacy that will stand for generations. I watch my brother bask in the unearned glory. He is so completely intoxicated by the applause that he does not notice the subtle movement near the audio-visual control booth at the back of the room. One of Maxwell's security specialists is currently standing inside the booth. She has already relieved the hotel technician of his post, presenting the exact same acquisition documents that neutralized Donovan's security chief. The hotel is mine, and by extension so is the control room. And now Spencer announces, sweeping his arm toward the massive blank screen suspended above the stage. I am thrilled to give you the very first public look at the future of Chicago. I give you the Apex Tower. He presses the remote clicker in his hand, expecting the breathtaking architectural models to render on the screens in glorious high definition. The screens flash brilliant white. The crowd murmurs in anticipation. But the image that appears is not a gleaming skyscraper of glass and steel. It is a stark, high-contrast photograph of a banking ledger. The murmurs shift from awe to profound confusion. Spencer turns around, a confident smile frozen on his face, and stares up at the screen. The smile shatters instantly. The document projected across the screens is a detailed bank statement from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The account holder is listed in bold black lettering: Spencer Montgomery. Below the name is a highlighted column of wire transfers, each corresponding to a massive withdrawal from the primary investment fund meant for the Apex Tower. Arthur Vance squints at the screen, recognizing the specific dates and exact nine-figure dollar amounts. Beside him, Marcus Lynn's face turns an angry shade of red. Spencer frantically presses the clicker in his hand, his thumb jamming the button over and over again. "Turn it off!" he hisses into the microphone, his voice echoing loudly through the ballroom. "There is a glitch. Turn the screens off right now." Instead, a new slide transitions smoothly onto the display. It contains a series of internal emails between Spencer and a notorious underground gambling syndicate demanding immediate payment for a staggering 8-figure debt. The emails detail exactly how Spencer planned to siphon the Apex Tower funding, hiding the missing capital under the guise of inflated material costs and falsified contractor invoices. The evidence is glaring undisputed, and currently being digested by every single financial journalist in the room. Panic rips through the crowd. Arthur Vance stands up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. He points a shaking finger directly at Spencer. "You stole from us!" Arthur shouts, his voice cutting through the rising din. "You arrogant little thief, you took our money!" Spencer stammers, backing away from the podium, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. He looks frantically for our father, his eyes darting wildly across the angry crowd. Donovan is fighting his way through the throngs of confused guests, desperately trying to reach the stage. He is shouting for security, demanding that someone kill the power to the hotel. But before he can reach the front row, the final fatal blow is delivered. The speakers positioned around the ballroom emit a sharp burst of static, silencing the chaotic shouting. Then a voice fills the room. It is crisp, aristocratic, and dripping with a furious, heartbroken clarity. It is the voice of Beatrice Montgomery. "I am making this recording because I know what my son has done, and I know what he is capable of." My grandmother's voice echoes over the crowd. The entire ballroom freezes. The absolute silence that falls over the hundreds of guests is deafening. Donovan stops dead in his tracks, the color draining from his face as he hears his mother speaking from beyond the grave. Donovan did not build Montgomery architecture with his own hands. The recording continues, the audio impossibly loud. "He stole the foundation of this company directly from my private accounts. He forged my signature on multiple withdrawal slips, draining millions to fund his investments. When I confronted him, he threatened to destroy his father's legacy by fabricating a scandal and releasing it to the press. He blackmailed me into silence. My own son held our family's reputation hostage to cover his theft. I have documented every stolen dollar and forged signature. Donovan Montgomery is a thief, a liar, and a disgrace." The recording clicks off, leaving the devastating truth hanging in the air. The destruction of the Montgomery myth is complete. Donovan stands paralyzed in the center of the room, entirely exposed. His manufactured empire, built on decades of deceit and stolen wealth, has just been vaporized in front of the people he fought so hard to impress. He stares up at the speakers, his mouth slightly open, his chest heaving as the reality of his ruin crashes down upon him. The ballroom descends into unmitigated chaos. The stunned silence fractures into a roar of outrage. Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn leap to their feet, shouting for their legal teams and demanding immediate federal investigations. The political figures, terrified of being associated with a massive financial crime, begin scrambling toward the exits, desperate to distance themselves from the Montgomery family. On the stage, Spencer has collapsed. He is sitting on the floor behind the podium, clutching his head in his hands, rocking back and forth as the world he knew is ripped away. The media cameras flash relentlessly, capturing every second of the historic implosion. Journalists are shouting questions over the noise, their microphones thrust toward the stage, while others are frantically typing on their phones, breaking the scandal of the decade. I stand amidst the swirling chaos, flanked by Maxwell and my formidable legal team. I look at my father, watching the arrogant giant reduced to a terrified, broken man. He meets my gaze across the crowded room, his eyes wide with realization. He understands that the daughter he threw away has just orchestrated his destruction. I step forward, leaving the protective circle of my legal team, and walk directly to the secondary microphone stand set up near the edge of the stage. The feedback squeals sharply for a fraction of a second, cutting through the shouting and the chaos. The noise pierces the frantic energy of the ballroom, drawing hundreds of shocked, wide eyes directly to me. I grip the cool metal of the microphone stand, feeling the steady thrum of my own heartbeat grounding me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I say, my voice echoing evenly across the cavernous space, overriding the panicked murmurs. "My name is Bethany Montgomery. I am the sole owner of the Vanguard Holding Group, the legal entity that possesses the land beneath your feet, and the parcel designated for the Apex Tower. What you are witnessing tonight is not a technical malfunction or a targeted corporate smear campaign. It is now the long overdue demolition of a massive toxic generational fraud." I gesture up toward the glowing screens where the damning bank statements and desperate emails from underground casinos remain projected for the entire world to digest. Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn are standing rigidly by their tables, their faces pale with furious realization. The documents illuminating this room detail the systematic embezzlement of over $40 million in primary investment capital. I continue ensuring my enunciation is perfectly clear for the dozens of media cameras currently recording every syllable. This capital was fraudulently diverted by Spencer Montgomery to cover staggering personal debts to illicit criminal organizations. But this financial rot does not stop with my brother. As you just heard from the lips of the true founder of this family empire, my grandmother, Beatrice Montgomery, Donovan Montgomery, built this entire architectural firm on stolen seed money and vicious blackmail. I look directly back at the investors. To protect my grandmother's lasting legacy and the integrity of the Vanguard Holding Group, I have officially terminated the land lease agreement for the Apex Tower project. There will absolutely be no groundbreaking. There will absolutely be no new tower. A fresh wave of shock ripples through the crowd. Reporters frantically speak into their recording devices while wealthy socialites whisper behind raised hands. On the stage, the facade finally cracks completely. Spencer pushes himself up from the floor, his custom tuxedo wrinkled and his perfectly styled hair hanging in his face. The golden child is gone, replaced by a terrified, cornered boy. He grabs the main podium microphone, his hands shaking so violently the stand rattles. It was all him. Spencer screams, his voice cracking with hysterical panic. He points a trembling finger directly down at Donovan, who is standing frozen in front of the stage. "He made me do it. He told me to move the money. He said we could cover the losses once the commercial leases were finalized. I did not ever want to steal anything. He forcefully pressured me into the massive fraud to save the failing firm." The crowd gasps, recoiling from the raw, ugly display of a son throwing his father entirely under the bus to save himself. Donovan's face turns an alarming shade of violet. The shock holding him in place shatters, replaced by a volcanic, unhinged rage. He lunges toward the edge of the stage, his eyes bulging as he turns his fury away from Spencer and directs it entirely at me. "Lies." Donovan loudly roars, his booming voice echoing without the aid of a microphone. He points a heavy, thick, accusatory finger at my face, spittle physically flying from his lips. She completely falsified all of this data. She hacked the servers and fabricated these documents because she is a jealous, pathetic, failed architect. She simply could not cut it in my firm, so she is trying to destroy her own brother out of pure vindictive spite. He sounds like a madman screaming into the void. The undeniable evidence is literally glowing above his head, authenticated and absolutely undeniable. But Donovan Montgomery refuses to accept defeat. He believes that if he shouts loud enough, reality will finally bend to his will. Before he can unleash another string of desperate accusations, a woman pushes her way to the front of the crowd. My mother Barbara stumbles into the open space between the stage and the VIP tables. She is wearing a shimmering silver gown, but the elegant image is ruined by her frantic, tear-streaked face. She ignores her ruined husband and her sobbing son rushing directly toward me. She bypasses my legal team, throwing herself into my personal space. She grabs my forearms, her manicured nails digging painfully into the fabric of my suit. "Bethany, please!" Barbara cries out, her voice a shrill, desperate plea that carries over the hushed crowd. "Look at what you are doing. We are your family. We are your blood. You cannot do this to us. You cannot destroy us like this." I look down at the woman who birthed me, the woman who stood silently by while my father crushed my spirit, the woman who actively participated in my emotional exile to protect her own comfortable existence. I feel no anger toward her in this moment. I feel absolutely nothing at all. It is a profound, incredibly freeing emptiness. I gently but firmly pry her hands off my arms, stepping back to establish an icy, impenetrable boundary between us. "You simply let him call me a thief for over a year." I say, my voice low but carrying a razor-sharp edge that makes her flinch. "You watched him strip away my career, my reputation, and my dignity, and you did not say a single word in my defense. You actively demanded that I surrender my grandmother's legacy just to cover up your husband's crimes and your son's profound failures." Barbara shakes her head, sobbing openly, now her hands reaching out in a futile gesture of reconciliation. "Blood does not mean loyalty, Mother." I continue, my gaze locking onto hers with absolute, unwavering resolve. "It just means you knew exactly where to stab me." She physically crumbles, covering her face with her hands as a profound, agonizing sob racks her body. She turns and walks away, unable to meet my eyes for another second, retreating into the crowd that parts to let her pass, with nobody offering her even a single shred of comfort. Donovan witnesses this exchange and loses whatever sanity he has left. He lets out a guttural roar. He lunges across the few feet separating us, raising his clenched fist high. He intends to strike me down right here, driven by a blind, destructive rage that has consumed him entirely. I do not flinch. I stand my ground, ready to take the physical blow, but the blow never lands. Before Donovan can swing his arm forward, the massive double doors of the grand ballroom burst open with a deafening crash. A team of men and women in dark windbreakers and tactical gear march into the ballroom with terrifying coordination. The letters FBI are emblazoned across their backs. Arthur Vance stands near his table, lowering his cell phone. The defrauded investors had already contacted the authorities. Federal agents walk onto the stage, seizing Spencer's laptop and all his files. Two agents immediately intercept Donovan, wrestling his arms behind his back. The sharp click of handcuffs echoes through the completely silent room. They escort Donovan and Spencer out in cold steel restraints for immense financial fraud. The heavy oak doors of the grand ballroom swung shut, sealing away the chaotic shouts of the defrauded investors and the blinding flashes of the press cameras. That single echoing slam signaled the definitive end of Montgomery architecture. 3 months have passed since that night. The dust from the catastrophic implosion has finally settled over the Chicago financial district, revealing a landscape entirely reshaped by the truth. The towering corporate headquarters that my father spent decades building on the back of my grandmother's stolen wealth is now nothing more than an empty, hollow shell. The firm was forced into immediate bankruptcy proceedings the very next morning. Every drafting table, every high-back leather chair in the executive boardroom, and every piece of proprietary software was ruthlessly liquidated to repay the furious syndicate of investors Arthur Vance and Marcus Lynn had rallied together. The Montgomery name, once a golden ticket in this city, became a toxic brand overnight. Contractors walked off job sites. Commercial lease agreements were voided by panicked developers. The sweeping glass doors of the firm were chained from the inside, a foreclosure notice plastered across the front entrance for every passing pedestrian to see. It was a swift, brutal, and entirely justified erasure of a company built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Donovan and Spencer are currently confined to their respective homes wearing federal ankle monitors while they await trial. The initial bail hearings were a humiliating spectacle broadcast on every major news network across the country. The federal prosecutors laid out the agonizingly detailed web of Spencer's offshore embezzlement and Donovan's historic generational fraud. The men who had spent their entire lives projecting an image of absolute untouchable power were reduced to shuffling into a federal courthouse in standard-issue jumpsuits, hiding their faces behind manila envelopes. The media coverage has been absolutely relentless. Chicago thrives on a spectacular downfall, and the local press has dissected every single facet of the Montgomery collapse. They contrast the dark, sordid details of my father's blackmail and my brother's underground gambling debts against my sudden meteoric rise. My face is splashed across the financial sections of the Sunday papers, invariably accompanied by headlines marveling at the discarded daughter who quietly orchestrated the greatest corporate coup of the decade. They call me a visionary. They call me a ruthlessly brilliant strategist. They have absolutely no idea about the sheer volume of tears I shed in the dark, or the terrifying leap of faith it took to finally stop shrinking myself to fit into my father's narrow, suffocating mold. I am not a superhero. I am simply a woman who refused to let her family bury her alive. I am sitting behind a massive polished mahogany desk in the newly established executive suite of the Vanguard Holding Group. The office occupies the top floor of a sleek, modernist building in the Loop, featuring floor-to-ceiling windows that offer a commanding view of the city skyline. It is a view I earned. I am no longer fetching lukewarm coffees or silently fixing structural errors in the background, while Spencer takes the credit. I am the undisputed head of my own holding company, actively managing the vast, complex portfolio of real estate and corporate assets that my grandmother Beatrice intended for me to have all along. The transition was grueling, requiring endless meetings with forensic accountants and corporate regulators to cleanly untangle my legitimate inheritance from the toxic wreckage of my father's firm. I did not navigate that minefield alone. Maxwell Thorne occupies the office directly across the hall. We operate as two distinct entities, but our collaboration has become incredibly seamless. Thorne Industries provides the logistical infrastructure I need as I rapidly expand my holdings, while Vanguard offers Maxwell access to prime real estate acquisitions that were previously locked behind Montgomery monopolies. He has been a constant steadying presence throughout the chaotic transition. Maxwell walks into my office without knocking, carrying 2 steaming cups of dark roast coffee and a thick file of preliminary zoning permits for a new commercial plaza we are jointly developing. He sets a cup down in front of me, taking the leather armchair opposite my desk. His sharp, dark eyes scan my face, always reading the subtle shifts in my mood. "You are staring at the skyline again," Maxwell says, his deep voice pulling me from my thoughts. "You have a habit of doing that when you are plotting something ruthless." I take a slow sip of the hot coffee, leaning back in my chair. "I am not plotting anything today," I reply, letting out a quiet breath. "I am just reflecting on the sheer velocity of the past 3 months. It feels like a completely different lifetime." Maxwell nods, opening his file. "Trauma has a funny way of burning away the unnecessary parts of our lives," he says evenly. "You walked into that ballroom wearing armor, Bethany. You have not taken it off since, and frankly, it suits you." He is right. The fear and the desperate craving for my family's validation have been completely eradicated. I have channeled the betrayal, the gaslighting, and the sheer cruelty of my father and brother into an unshakable business acumen. When I sit in boardrooms now, I do not second-guess my instincts. When aggressive developers try to back me into a corner, I do not fold. I simply look at them, remembering the cold, dead eyes of my father as he tried to strip me of everything I owned, and I push back with twice the force. I have survived the absolute worst my own blood could inflict upon me. Nothing a rival CEO says can possibly shake me. We spend the next hour combing through the zoning permits, adjusting property lines, and calculating projected commercial tax incentives. It is satisfying, tangible work, the kind of architectural and developmental planning I always dreamed of doing before my family systematically crushed my ambition. I am finally building a legacy that belongs entirely to me, free from the dark shadows of my father's manipulation. The quiet, productive hum of the executive office is suddenly broken by the sharp, persistent chime of the intercom sitting on the corner of my polished desk. I reach out and press the silver button, keeping my eyes focused on the blueprints spread out before me. "Yes, Sarah," I say, addressing my newly hired executive assistant. "I apologize for the sudden interruption, Ms. Montgomery." Sarah's voice comes through the speaker, sounding unusually tense and slightly breathless. "But there is a woman down in the main lobby who is aggressively demanding to see you. I politely informed her that you are completely booked for the afternoon and require an advance appointment, but she is blatantly refusing to leave the reception area. She is becoming quite agitated and causing a disruption." I frown, looking up from the documents and exchanging a quick, wary glance with Maxwell. He slowly closes the heavy permit file, his posture instantly shifting from relaxed to highly alert. "Did she give you a name, Sarah?" I ask, keeping my tone perfectly level despite the sudden cold knot forming in my stomach. "Yes, ma'am, she did," the assistant replies, the deep discomfort evident in her trembling voice. "She says her name is Barbara Montgomery. She says she is your mother, and she insists that she is absolutely not leaving this very building until you personally come downstairs and finally speak to her today." I look at the glowing light on the intercom. The silence in my office stretches out heavy and thick with the sudden intrusion of my past. Maxwell watches me from across the desk. He does not offer unsolicited advice or try to guide my response. He simply waits, giving me the silent space to decide how I want to handle the woman who helped tear my life apart. I press my finger down on the silver button. "Send her up, Sarah," I say, keeping my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "Have security escort her to the executive floor, but do not let her wander. Bring her into my office." I release the button and look back at Maxwell. He nods once, picking up his coffee cup and the thick file of zoning permits. "I will give you the room," Maxwell says, his tone steady. "If you need anything, I will be right across the hall." He stands up, straightens his suit jacket, and walks out the door, pulling it gently shut behind him. I am left entirely alone in the massive executive suite. I take a deep breath, inhaling the faint scent of polished wood and fresh paper, grounding myself in the reality of my present. I do not feel the familiar panicked flutter in my chest that used to accompany any interaction with my mother. The terrified, desperate girl who constantly craved Barbara Montgomery's affection is completely gone. I simply sit behind my desk, fold my hands neatly on top of the glass surface, and wait for the elevator to make its ascent to the top floor. The heavy wooden door to my office slowly opens a few minutes later. Sarah steps inside, looking highly uncomfortable, and steps aside to allow my mother to enter the room. Sarah quietly closes the door, leaving us completely alone. I stare at the woman standing just inside my doorway, and for a fleeting second, I almost do not recognize her. Barbara Montgomery has been entirely stripped of her formidable armor. The woman who used to glide through charity galas in custom designer gowns and dripping with diamonds looks incredibly small. She is wearing a plain, slightly wrinkled beige trench coat over a simple black dress that lacks any recognizable designer label. Her signature platinum blonde hair is pulled back into a messy, unkempt knot at the nape of her neck. The heavy, expertly applied makeup she always used to mask her genuine emotions is completely gone, revealing deep, dark circles under her eyes and harsh, prominent lines of stress around her mouth. The social arrogance that once radiated from her every movement has completely evaporated. She looks diminished, exhausted, and profoundly terrified. She stands near the door, her eyes darting frantically around my sprawling executive office. She takes in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the expensive modern art on the walls, and the massive mahogany and glass desk that separates us. She is finally seeing the tangible reality of my success, the undeniable proof of the empire I have built from the absolute wreckage they left me. Her lower lip begins to tremble. "Bethany," my mother whispers, her voice cracking, as she takes a hesitant step forward onto the plush carpet. "You look so beautiful. You look so powerful sitting behind that desk. I do not offer her a seat. I do not offer her a glass of water. I simply watch her my face a perfect mask of corporate neutrality. What do you want, Barbara? I ask, my tone polite, but entirely devoid of any familial warmth. The use of her first name makes her flinch, as if I have physically struck her. She takes another step forward, her hands wringing together nervously in front of her chest. I have absolutely nowhere else to go, Barbara says, the tears already pooling in her eyes and spilling over her cheeks. The federal government seized everything, Bethany. They froze the bank accounts. They took the house in Lake Forest. They even impounded the cars. I have been staying in a cheap motel near the airport for the past 3 days because none of my friends will return my phone calls. Everyone in our social circle has completely abandoned me. She takes another desperate step toward my desk. Donovan and Spencer are facing decades in federal prison, and the lawyers are demanding retainers I cannot possibly pay. I have absolutely nothing left. I do not know how to survive without your father's money. I have never had to manage finances or pay rent or buy groceries on a strict budget. I am terrified, Bethany. I am begging you to help me. I just sit there letting her frantic words wash over me. She is not apologizing for the years of emotional abuse. She is not expressing remorse for sitting silently while Donovan destroyed my career. She is simply looking for a new source of funding. When she realizes that her tears are not eliciting a sympathetic reaction, she shifts her tactics. She attempts to deploy the maternal guilt she weaponized throughout my entire childhood. I am your mother, she cries out, reaching a hand out toward me across the glass desk. We are family. I know things got difficult at the end, and I know your father was harsh, but I always loved you. I always wanted the best for you. Do you remember when you were a little girl and we used to sit in the garden? I always told you that you were special. You cannot just turn your back on your own flesh and blood when I am standing here begging for my life. You have so much now. You have this massive company and all of your grandfather's assets. You could easily give me enough to secure a small apartment and pay for legal counsel. It would be nothing to you, Bethany. Please just help your mother. I look at her outstretched, trembling hand. I do not feel a single flash of anger. The burning rage has been entirely replaced by a profound, chilling clarity. I open the top drawer of my desk, reach inside, and pull out a standard white business envelope. I place it on the glass surface and slide it smoothly across the desk until it rests directly in front of her. Barbara lets out a loud breath of relief. She wipes the tears from her cheeks, her eyes lighting up with eager anticipation. She clearly assumes that the envelope contains a substantial cashier's check or emergency cash. She believes her maternal performance has successfully manipulated me into providing a comfortable safety net. She snatches the envelope, fumbling eagerly with the sealed flap. She rips it open and tilts it upside down, shaking the contents out onto the polished glass. Her eager smile vanishes instantly. A crisp $5 bill flutters onto the desk. A crumpled, faded white receipt from a downtown steakhouse follows it, landing right next to the currency. Barbara stares at the meager items, completely uncomprehending. She looks up at me, her eyes wide with shock. "What is this?" she asks in a harsh, offended whisper. "That is exactly what Dad left me when I was trying to survive," I say with absolute finality. "And you sat right there and watched him do it." I press the silver button on my intercom. "Security, my guest is now leaving us." I watch my mother be politely but firmly escorted out, cementing the final boundary forever. The heavy glass doors of Vanguard Holding Group close, and the last tie to my toxic past is severed. I sit in the silence of my office, listening to the faint sounds of the city below. I do not feel guilt or a sudden rush of regret. I only feel the clean sensation of absolute freedom. That profound lightness carries me through the rest of the week, propelling me toward a morning I have anticipated for my entire life. The Chicago air is crisp as I step from my car onto the uneven gravel of the downtown lot. This is the exact parcel of land where my father had arrogantly planned to erect the Apex Tower, the glass monument to his stolen legacy. Now the sprawling site is a beautifully blank canvas. The heavy machinery of an excavation crew is idling quietly along the perimeter, their yellow metal gleaming under the cloudless blue sky. A cool breeze rolls off Lake Michigan, rustling my tailored coat as I navigate the terrain. I pause in the center of the vast dirt lot, listening to the rhythmic hum of the surrounding traffic. I close my eyes for a fraction of a second, letting the reality of this moment wash over me. I own the ground beneath my boots. I dictate what rises from this soil. A site manager approaches, handing me a pristine white hard hat bearing the Vanguard logo. I secure it in place and walk over to a wide wooden drafting table set up near the edge of the active excavation zone. I reach into the leather carrying tube slung over my shoulder and pull out a massive roll of architectural blueprints. As I spread the heavy paper across the rough boards, securing the curling edges with metal clips, a deep sense of pride swells in my chest. These are not the stolen drafts of my grandfather or the flawed mistakes of my brother. These are my own original designs, meticulously crafted late at night and refined through years of silent, uncredited observation. The sweeping lines and innovative structural supports detail the foundation of the Beatrice Center. It is not going to be an ego-driven skyscraper designed to cast an oppressive shadow over the streets. Instead, it is a state-of-the-art architectural incubator. The building features an open, sustainable design, utilizing natural light, sweeping interior garden terraces, and collaborative workspaces. It is intentionally structured to foster community rather than cutthroat corporate competition. The entire facility will be dedicated to funding mentoring and actively supporting young, unrecognized female talent in the architectural industry. I am building the exact professional sanctuary that I desperately needed when I was fighting simply to be seen in my father's firm. I trace my fingers reverently over the intricate elevation drawings, imagining the vibrant women who will soon fill these halls. They will never have their names erased from their own blueprints. They will not be forced to fetch coffee or told that their ambition is a liability. They will be given the resources, the funding, and the platform to shape the future of this city on their own terms. It is the purest way I can honor my grandmother's memory. Beatrice Montgomery was viciously silenced, her fortune drained to build a generational lie, but her name will now forever be synonymous with empowerment and unyielding integrity. I hear the steady crunch of footsteps approaching on the gravel and look up from the drafting table. Maxwell Thorne walks toward me wearing his own hard hat and a sharp charcoal suit that looks out of place on a construction site, yet he wears it with effortless command. He stops beside me, leaning his hands on the edge of the table to study the sprawling blueprints. He does not offer unsolicited corrections or attempt to take over the presentation. He simply looks at my intricate work with genuine admiration. You have completely redefined the integration of green spaces in a commercial zone, Maxwell says, his dark eyes scanning the complex schematics. The structural load distribution on the eastern terrace is incredibly innovative. It is going to be the most breathtaking building in the entire financial district, Bethany. I smile, feeling the comforting warmth of his genuine professional validation. I appreciate that, I reply, rolling up a secondary sheet of internal structural details. But it is only possible because Thorne Industries secured the sustainable material supply chains so efficiently. Your logistics team has been absolutely flawless from day one. Maxwell turns his head to look directly at me, and the dynamic between us is powerfully palpable. He is no longer the imposing billionaire CEO extending a highly risky lifeline to an exiled daughter. We are standing here in the dirt, as true, undeniable equals. We are partners in every sense of the word, bound by a shared vision and a mutual respect that was forged in the devastating fires of corporate warfare. He gestures out toward the steel and glass structures that dominate the Chicago skyline. For decades, men like your father built this city on a crumbling foundation of theft, intimidation, and ruthless blackmail, Maxwell says, his deep voice carrying a quiet intensity. They believed that success required breaking the innocent people around them. But you are proving them entirely wrong. You are about to change the literal shape of the skyline, and you are doing it with absolute integrity. I look out at the towering buildings, thinking of the dark secrets currently buried in their deep foundations. We are going to build something that actually lasts, I say softly, my gaze tracking the clouds. Something that does not have to be hidden behind locked doors and falsified offshore bank statements. A small crowd of local journalists, city officials, and prospective investors is beginning to gather near the designated press area, waiting for the official groundbreaking ceremony to commence. The silver-plated shovels are lined up nearby, resting against a mound of dark soil. Before we join the crowd, Maxwell steps back, giving me a moment of quiet privacy. I turn away from the drafting table and look out over the beautiful expanse of the Chicago skyline. The morning sun catches the endless glass facades of the soaring skyscrapers, turning the city into a glittering sea of light. I take a slow, deep breath, letting the cool morning air fill my lungs completely. I am no longer the pathetic family scapegoat. I am no longer the invisible ghost haunting the drafting rooms of Montgomery architecture, silently fixing my brother's catastrophic errors while craving a single word of approval from a man who despised my existence. I am no longer the humiliated waitress picking up discarded napkins at a charity gala while my own blood publicly mocks me. I have entirely reclaimed my own name. I have ruthlessly avenged my grandmother's stolen legacy, ensuring that her quiet brilliance will directly fund generations of talented women who follow in my footsteps. I have permanently secured my own financial and professional future on my own uncompromising terms. The agonizing trauma and the profound betrayal that once threatened to destroy me have been completely transmuted into an impenetrable radiant shield. As I walk confidently toward the awaiting press cameras, and the bright, undeniable future rising from this very dirt, I know with absolute certainty that my grandfather's letter was right all along. True independence is not just financial security. It is the greatest, most unbreakable armor I will ever wear. The story of Bethany Montgomery teaches us that our greatest strength often lies in the very things others try to suppress. For years, Bethany was told she was not enough. She was forced to shrink herself to hide her brilliance behind her brother's mediocrity and to accept the scraps of validation her toxic family threw her way. But her journey reminds us that true power does not come from waiting for the people who hurt us to finally see our worth. True power comes from recognizing our own value and refusing to let anyone else dictate our potential. When Bethany discovered the truth about her grandmother's legacy and her father's massive fraud, she did not react with blind, chaotic rage. She reacted with calculated, unshakable resolve. She understood that the most profound justice is not simply destroying those who wronged you, but rather building a life so magnificent that their dark shadows can no longer touch you. She reclaimed her rightful inheritance, not just to secure her own financial future, but to create a powerful sanctuary for other women who had been marginalized and overlooked in their fields. Blood does not automatically equal loyalty, and family is not always defined by the people who raise us. Sometimes the people who share our DNA are the ones who cause us the deepest pain. Bethany's story illustrates the immense courage it takes to walk away from a deeply toxic environment and the incredible freedom that awaits on the other side. She effectively transformed her heavy trauma into impenetrable armor and her pain into a lasting, beautiful purpose. Share your own story of reclaiming your power and walking away from toxicity in the comments below. If Bethany's journey of resilience resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories of triumph and breaking new ground.